announcing a new joint task force to operate in the strategic waterway. Now we start from the Middle East. The Israeli military has continued attacks at multiple locations in the Gaza Strip, resulting in the deaths of at least 3 people and leaving several others injured. The recent strikes marks the 4th consecutive day that Israel has carried out attacks following Prime Minister Netanyahu's directive to the IDF for immediate and powerful strikes, alleging ceasefire violations by Hamas. The strikes continue as both sides have exchanged the bodies of their respective citizens. This comes as talks are underway on the second phase of the Gaza peace plan for the deployment of an international stabilization force. The continued Israeli strikes cast doubt over the longevity of the ceasefire agreement. The Israeli military has continued attacks at multiple locations in the Gaza Strip, resulting in the deaths of at least 3 people and leaving several others injured. The recent strikes marks the 4th consecutive day that Israel has carried out attacks. Now for this discussion, we welcome Xavier Abu Eid. He's a political analyst, joins us live from Ramallah. Thank you very much, Xavier, for joining us. Welcome to NewsX World. Now, what is happening over there? Can you tell us the reality of how the ceasefire phase 1 is holding up as we see strikes have been continuing from both sides?
First of all, thanks for having me here. There is certainly a lot of uncertainty when it comes to the people in Gaza. And that's because even though the level of Israeli destruction and aggression has decreased, it has not stopped. Israel still controls, for example, the amount of food that enters Gaza. And one may wonder, why would Israel care about the amount of food that enters Gaza? It has no security significance, but it's an element that Israel continues to use food as a bargaining chip in any sort of negotiations. So it's very difficult to understand what's going on, because from one side, we all tend to agree that Israel is not going to go back to the amount of destruction they had already inflicted on Gaza. Let's remember that almost 90% of Gaza has been destroyed by this Israeli genocide. But at the same time, we don't know how the way out would be. And perhaps what Israel is trying to seek at this stage is to have something very similar to what they have in Lebanon, where they reach a ceasefire on one side, but on the other side, attacks against Lebanese and their sovereign territory have continued.
And do you think that as the talks are going on for phase 2, do you think they are ready to continue talks on phase 2? And what about the disarmament of Hamas? Is that feasible?
I think, first of all, when we talk about security measures, it's important to talk about security for everyone, not just for Israelis. And when we are talking about an Israeli army that has been engaged on a genocide, as leading Israeli legal experts have been saying, at the same time that we have attacks against Palestinians, let's not forget also here in the occupied West Bank by Israeli forces and illegal Israeli settlers. I think it's also important to set the issue of what's going to happen for the security guarantees for the Palestinians, not just for the Israelis. Now, when it comes to the disarmament of Hamas, I think Hamas leaders have been clear that they are willing to disarm as far as the disarmament is given to a Palestinian government or a Palestinian authority. And I think it's important for Palestinian factions and Palestinian leaders to act together as soon as possible in order to have this Palestinian administration in Gaza, which is also important not just because of the disarmament of Hamas, but it's also important because it would be very damaging for the prospects of any future deals that Gaza and the West Bank have different legal status. We need to have Gaza and the West Bank under the same political and legal framework.
Can you tell us more about Palestinian Authority and who as a government could be legitimate or could be called or trusted as a government who can control all the areas you have described in your answer? and who will be trusted moving forward?
I think there is a consensus that Palestinian Authority with needed reforms is the authority that needs to be not just in the West Bank but also in Gaza. But we should also remember that Israel is conducting several steps to literally strangle the Palestinian Authority by, for example, withholding taxes that are Palestinian taxes and that under signed agreements should be part of Palestine. They are a very significant part of the budget. So the Palestinian Authority, for example, has not been able for several months to pay full salaries for its employees. The PA remains the largest employer in the occupied Palestinian territory, and I think that's also an important point. But there is also, I think, something that the viewers should understand. The Palestinian Authority is an entity created by the Oslo Agreement, which was supposed to last only for 5 years, as negotiations on all final status issues, including, for example, Jerusalem or refugees or borders, were being conducted in order to achieve a two-state solution. Israel opposes a two-state solution. Israel opposes also one state with equal rights for everyone. Israel's plan, at best, would be apartheid or one state and two different systems, one with full discrimination against Palestinian citizens, as well as ethnic cleansing and annexation. So in this colonial settler occupation context, I think it's important to understand that the issue of Palestinian governance should be tied also to the future political prospects. And from that perspective, I think Israel should be stopped now on its attempts against Palestinians, not just in Gaza, but also in the occupied West Bank.
With that, I would like to thank Javier Abu Eid for joining us as a political analyst and sharing that insight all the way from Ramallah.